Okay, the first step in the water treatment process, or whatever the treatment practices that has been present, actually in the previous classes, Madam has taught the concept related to what are the different flow chart that has been required either for a surface water bodies or maybe for the groundwater. What are the different steps that has been involved in the treatment? For example, either it may be a screening, next it may be the aeration process. After the aeration, next it might be the coagulation cum sedimentation. Further, it is also subjected for the removal of the fine colloidal or maybe the suspended particles through the filtration, and further in order to remove the bacteria content, therefore the disinfection process is being allowed. Why there is a requirement of the different treatment units? Why not we can be able to adopt everything at a once itself only in a one single treatment unit? Because it is not at all possible, because multiple issues arises. Therefore, the water treatment or the load on the treatment also tend to increase. So in that regard, there will be a separate treatment units that are to be provided either for any surface water treatment, that may be in the case of a lake or a river, or maybe in the case of the groundwater treatment also. Okay, so in this model number 2, mainly the last bit of the portion that is left out is related to the aeration. Aeration is the primary step for the water treatment. Okay, what is meant by aeration? I think some of the flow chart, they have the aeration process. If in the case of the groundwater, you can see the amount of the dissolved oxygen content is less. Whereas if you're going to compare in the case of the surface water, the amount of the dissolved oxygen content will be more. Okay. In further, in order to increase the dissolved oxygen content, or in order to remove some of the contaminants such as like an iron or a manganese or even some of the bacteria, in that aspect, therefore, we need to adopt this aeration process. Okay. Let us get to know one by one concept related to the aeration. Okay, so moving on to the first bit about the definition of an aeration. What is meant by aeration? So these are the contents of the presentation. So one by one, it is related to the definition, concepts, objectives of an aeration and types of aerators, and finally the two film theory, and later on what are the limitations of an aeration process. Next one, the process of bringing air in contact with water or water in contact with air is what we're going to call it as an aeration process. Are you going to getting to know the concept? Okay. The process of bringing air in contact with water or water in contact with air is called as an aeration. The term here aeration, it is actually slightly derived from the any French or maybe even the Greek word also. Okay, air plus which you want to increase the content. Okay, you need to adopt some of the unit process or maybe the unit operation. Unit process means changes in the quality or the characteristics of the water done by adding some of the chemicals is what, or maybe through the any biological aid. Either it may be for the water or through the wastewater treatment. We call it as an unit process. Unit operation means the water which has been subjected by the action of physical forces which tends to change the quality or the characteristics of the water. We call it as an unit operations. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಇದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ, so what is the next another objectives of an aeration? Why we need to provide the aeration? What is the necessity of providing the aeration? The foremost important thing it is the primary step, and whenever the water is to be withdrawn from the usage of an intakes. Therefore, the water either it may be a turbid in nature or may contain some of the dissolved impurities or maybe even the suspended impurities also. If the suspended or the dissolved impurities are present in that, therefore, how to remove it? The primary step, aeration, cannot remove all those entire things. Therefore, it has certain part of an functions that to remove what are the different things that has been arising, and therefore ಹಂತ ಹಂತವಾಗಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಒಂದೊಂದಾಗಿ ಟ್ರೀಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ನ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ. Okay, so not at a once all the treatment will be given, it is stage by stages all the treatment will be adopted. Next thing it is, in coming on to the objectives, the first objective is to remove the taste and odor caused by the gases due to the organic decomposition. First one, the organic decomposition means it is mainly due to the presence of the bacteria or the virus content. Okay, bacteria or maybe any fungi or maybe any algae content, they utilize the organic matter present in the water, and upon their death, okay, there will be the deposition, and the organic matter such as like a dead or the decayed part of an animals or maybe any plants itself only will be degraded by the usage of the microorganisms. Therefore in that cases what happens, certain gases will be dissolved in order to remove the odor content, because hydrogen sulfide is a one part of the gas which is a byproduct of an anaerobic digestion or maybe the decomposition. That is a one thing. Next, another thing it is to remove the taste content. Taste, obviously, through the perception of the sense organs, taste has certain objectives. So what that means, the water has to be tasteless in nature. It is whether it may be a sour or maybe bitter in nature, it is not feasible. Okay. Next, another important object is, if you're going to take upon, it is to increase the dissolved oxygen content of the water. What is meant by the dissolved oxygen content? Obviously, whatever the amount of the oxygen which is being required, okay, amount of the oxygen which is being present in the water is what we call it as a dissolved oxygen. Example of the dissolved oxygen content, how it has been soluble, even though the nitrogen content in the atmosphere is more. The thing here, the main factor affecting the dissolved oxygen, it is the solubility content. Okay, and it is also gone by the Henry's law. The next, another most important aspects that we come across is mainly related to the dissolved oxygen where it is being utilized. Mainly, the dissolved oxygen content is being utilized by the fishes, or maybe we'll call it as an aquatic animals. Okay, this aquatic animals is also one of the another important aspects. Fishes or maybe the aquatic animals, they require the oxygen content. Therefore, in order to increase the oxygen content in the water, obviously the aeration is a must. Okay, especially in the case of an aquarium, if you're going to take, the dissolved oxygen content has to be maintained. Next thing, third objective it is to remove the hydrogen sulfide content H2S as well as the bacteria through the agitation process. Whenever the aeration takes place through the agitation mechanism, what happens? The water droplets tends to flow, okay, in the form of the free fall. In that case is what happens? Some of the bacteria cell will be broken out. When the bacterial cell will be broken out due to the flow in the form of the thin film, therefore it can be removed. Next, fourth objective it is reduction of the carbon dioxide content in the water, because carbon dioxide when it is being present in the water, it tends to form the carbonic acid. This amount of the carbonic acid, it is also corrosive in nature, and therefore there will be the decrease in the pH below 4 or maybe below 5 also. Okay, that is the range of the carbonic acid. The beyond the 4 or maybe less than 2, it is all the mineral acid like H2SO4, HNO3, HFL, or HCl, all this kind of the acidic compounds, they tend to exist in nature. Okay, therefore corrosive content to ತುಂಬಾ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, it may impact on the treatment plant where they go for using the pipelines or the networks, ಮತ್ತೆ ಪುನಃ distribution systems ಅಂತ ಹೋದಾಗ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದೇ ತರ impact ಆಗ್ತಾ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. That means it imparts the corrosiveness to the water pipelines. ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, the corrosivity content will leads to the leakages or maybe the bursting of the pipe. Okay, this content should not be tends to persist. ಅದನ್ನ ಆಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು ಅನ್ನೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. Okay. The next thing it is conversion of the soluble states of the iron and manganese into insoluble states. The conversion of the soluble states of the iron and manganese means iron content, it is a heavy metal, as well as the manganese is also an heavy metal content. So when this heavy metal content is being present in maximum extent, therefore there is also a promotion of the growth of the iron bacteria. Again, it is another important aspect. Presence of any acidic or maybe the alkaline content in any extreme cases will tend to corrode the pipelines or any of the metals. Okay. Therefore, if the corrosivity is caused by the acidic nature, therefore we need to neutralize it by raising the pH content. That is one of the most important things. Next thing it is, in the last objective, it is also used in the mixing of the chemicals with the water, as in the case of the aeromics process. Sometimes, especially in the case of the disinfection process, whenever there is a huge amount of the turbid content, especially ನೀವು ನೋಡಿರ್ಬೋದು ಈ ರೈನಿ ಸೀಸನ್ ಆದಾಗ ಏನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, the turbidity content will be more. When the turbidity content will be more, what happens? The load on the treatment plant also increases. In that cases, what happens? The bacteria or maybe any other sorts of the microorganisms, they tend to grow very much quickly. In that cases, in order to reduce that, therefore we need to add some of the chemicals like a bleaching powder or the chlorine. Therefore, in that cases, after the soon as the aeration process is being going on, some of the chemicals are being added. In some other cases, lime is also added, because in order to see that to recover or maybe whatever the carbon dioxide content it is being present, in order to see that it has been neutralized in nature. Okay, yeah. Shall I move on to the next part? Okay. When we know what are the different objectives of an aeration, the next thing it is we need to know what are the different types of the aerators. Okay. First one we come across especially the gravity type of an aerators. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾಲ್ಕು ತರ ಇದೆ. Next we also come across in the case of the spray aerators. Third one it is air diffuser basins. First one, gravity aerators or free fall aerators. The term gravity aerators or free fall aerators, it refers to the flow of the water in the form of a thin film, you expose it to the atmosphere, okay, and by the action of the gravity. Hence, the name we're going to call it as a gravity aerators or maybe the free fall aerators. That is one of the most important aspects. Now, if you're going to take the case of the spray aerators, it is in the form of the sprinklers. Maybe you might have visited any fountains, maybe present in the KRS region, or maybe even in the case of Mysore exhibition. ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ನೀವು ನೋಡಿರ್ತೀರ, ಎಂಟ್ರೆನ್ಸ್ ಬಂದಾಗಲೂ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಫೌಂಟೇನ್ ತರ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ. And inside also, okay, the sprinkler type of the systems are being introduced because they have the nozzles wherein huge amount of the water has to be passed and the required head will be more. Adana next part alli ನಾನು ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬರ್ತೀನಿ. ಈಗ let us get to know regarding to the gravity aerators or the free fall aerators. First one we call it as a cascade aerator or we call it as a step type of an aerator. Next we call it as a free fall aerators or what we call it as an apron aerators. ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ without the presence of any steps, it will be completely inclined in nature. That part of an inclination we call it as an apron aerators. Next, the slat tray type of an aerators. That means the water is introduced from the top of the tray, and the numerous number of the trays are being arranged one below the another. Okay, that kind of the trays wherein it was being tend to pass from one tray from the top till it has been passing to the bottom, that we're going to call it as a slat tray type of an aerators. And fourth one, it is the gravel bed type of an aerators. Gravel bed type of an aerators, it incorporates some of the anthracite, coke, lime, or sometimes even the coal also. Therefore, these are being used as a material which the water is subjected for the trickling, and hence the name we also call it as a trickling bed aerators ಅಂತನೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಓಕೆ, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಒಂದೊಂದಾಗಿ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಹೋಗೋಣ. This is related to the cascade aerators. You can see the raw water is being moving in the form of one step to another step, and therefore the raw water is being aerated. Here, what happens? There is a exposure. Okay, the exposure content, and in this exposure content, you can be able to see that you can be able to see that whatever the water that is being passing from one step to another step, it is in the form of the thin film. ಅದನ್ನ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು slide ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾನು ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀನಿ. This is the theoretical aspects which you're going to see. Okay, because in majority of the water treatment plant, we can see related to the cascade aerators itself only. Okay, here you can see the raw water, and it is being subjected for the aeration, where some portion of the water is being passing in the form of the thin film, and when this portion of the cascade is being getting to filling up, next it is moving on to the next consecutive cascade. So therefore this portion we call it as a launder. ಈ ಏರೇಟೆಡ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಅಂತ ಏನಿದೆ ಆ ಪೋರ್ಷನ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಒಂಚೂರು ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ ಅದ್ರದ್ದು ಹೈಟ್. ಯಾಕೆಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನೀರು ಹರ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬರೋವಾಗ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು, ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಒಂದು ಫ್ರೀ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಅಂತಾನು ಕೂಡ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಇದನ್ನ ಡಿಸೈನ್ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಬಂದಾಗ ದೀಸ್ ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ ದ ವೆರಿ ಮಚ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಆಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ಯು ನೀಡ್ ಟು ಸ್ಟಡಿ. ಓಕೆ, hence whenever the construction or maybe the design of the aerators are provided, please see that the aerated water should satisfy the objectives which have been stated in the previous slide. ಅದಷ್ಟನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಪೂರ್ತಿಯಾಗಿ ಸ್ಯಾಟಿಸ್ಫ್ಯಾಕ್ಟರಿ ಆಗಿ ಏನೇನು ಕಾಂಪೋನೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇದೆಯೋ, ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಟೀರಿಯಾ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಐರನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಮ್ಯಾಂಗನೀಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಕಾರ್ಬನ್ ಡೈಆಕ್ಸೈಡ್ ಕಂಟೆಂಟ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಷ್ಟನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ರಿಮೂವ್ ಮಾಡಲೇಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? Okay, moving on to the next type here itself only. This is what we call it as a inclined apron aerator. Inclined apron aerator means ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, sometimes it may be, ನೀವು ಜಾರು ಬಂಡೆಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿರ್ತೀರ ಅಲ್ವಾ? Okay, same type itself only. At the top portion the inlet is being provided, at the bottom the trough ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಅಥವಾ outlet portion ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, it is provided. What happens? The water in the form of a thin film easily flow across. So therefore the maximum amount of the exposure to the atmosphere happens there, and such kind of an aerators which are in an inclined region, that is a region. Why the inclined region is being provided here? We call it as a ripple or the plates and all. The reason is in the form of the gravitational up, that is the flow has to be happen. Okay, flow under the gravity. Therefore it also costs to be economical in nature. Okay, ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ನಾವು ಪವರ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಎರೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡೋಂಥ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಕೆಲವು ಸತಿ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಕೆಲವು ಸತಿ ಎಕನಾಮಿಕಲ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಡಿಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. And all this designing concepts has to be mentioned, especially if you're going to take in the case of an building up of the huge water treatment unit of the plants. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಓಕೆ, ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಒನ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಎರೇಟರ್ಸ್ ನಾ ಕ್ಯಾಸ್ಕೇಡ್ ಎರೇಟರ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ circular, it may be a square or maybe a rectangular. This is an example for an circular type of an cascade aerators. The height of the circular cascade aerators may be ranging from 1 meter up to 3 meters also. Okay, 1 to 3 meters depending upon the designing aspect. ಎಷ್ಟು ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಇದೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಡಿಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ. Say for example 50 mld in a treatment plant, especially in Melapur treatment plant, we have a 50 ml earlier. Now it has been extended. In that cases, what happens? Therefore, you need to provide the series of the steps in a circular manner where the water is being tend to pass in the mid portion. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರಬಹುದು, water is being ingushing from the middle portion. That we call it as a raising main ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? This is the one thing. The next important thing you can also see here itself on. Okay, this is another form of the cascade aerators. ಈ ಹಿಂದಿನ ದೃಶ್ಯಗೂ ಈ ದೃಶ್ಯಗೂ ನೀವು ನೋಡಬಹುದು, ಪ್ರತಿ ಒಂದೊಂದು ಟ್ರೀಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಡಿಸೈನಿಂಗ್ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ therefore based upon the designing considerations ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, the depth as well as the number of the steps also tends to change. And this is an example for the circular type of an cascade aeration process. Okay, here when you can see the series of steps are provided all over it, and therefore it is openly exposed to the atmosphere. Therefore, the water is getting in contact with the air, and therefore the dissolution takes place. ಆ ಡಿಸಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಯಾವ ತರ ರೀತಿ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೈನ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೇನೆ we have a theory called as a penetration theory as well as a two film theory. That I'll be going to explain the next part. Okay, next type of an aerators, if you're going to see slat tray type of an aerators. Slat tray type of an aerators means you can see here the water is being passed instead of the cascade. We introduce the trays and all number of the trays that has been introduced. Okay, what is the speciality? The slat rays either maybe here. This is the most common type of aerators. Geometry, if you're going to see, they may be a closed square or maybe a circular in nature. ನೀವು ಆ ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್ ನೋಡ್ತಿದ್ದಂಗೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗೋಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ ಅದ್ರ geometry ಯಾವ ತರ ರೀತಿ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ. So the trays have been placed one next to the another. Okay, and what happens here? So whenever the number of the trays are being kept one below the another, okay, side ali one portion ali water is being made to pass into the top portion of the tray, and the top portion of the tray is being perforated. Perforated means what happens? Small holes have been driven out. From that, the water will tend to move into the another tray. Okay, it tends to fall into the another tray, and it is being collected. That we call it as a collecting fans, or what we call it as a tray. Okay, next thing it is finally the water which is being entering over the trays one below the another. It is being collected at the bottom. Okay, so it is being collected at the bottom. This is one of the major aspect that we come across, especially in the case of the slat or maybe the tray type of an aerators. Once again, I'll be going to show you. You can see it here now. Okay, the slat tray type of an aerators. Here, you note it is a rectangular in nature, or sometimes it is also square in nature. These are all circular in nature. Okay, certain number of spacings have been provided. It'll not both. Okay, certain number of spacings are provided, or the perforations have been also provided. And the next important thing it is the equal distancing has been given here. Okay, ಏನಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ when the water is been falling from an height, therefore again the major thing it is to bring the surface water in contact with the air or atmosphere. ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಇದಂತ. Okay, the next important part that we come across apart from the slanted tray here, ನೀವು ಯಾವ ತರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಡಯಾಗ್ರಾಮು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. ಇದೇ ತರನೇ ನಾವು ಟ್ರಿಕ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಬೆಡ್ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಕೊಡ್ಬೋದು. ಅದು ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ಅವಾಗ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, instead of the trays we kept as an empty, if we go for adding some of the filter medias like a charcoal or maybe a coke or a lime, that we call it as a trickling bed tray type of an aerators. Okay, the next thing that we come across it is the different type of an aerator, especially the spray aerators. Spray aerators ನಾನು ಆವಾಗಲೇ ಹೇಳ್ದಂಗೆ ನೀವು ಫೌಂಟೇನ್ಸ್ ಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ನೋಡಬಹುದು. Okay, in the especially in the case of the fountains, you can also see the most important aspect here when we 1 minute for a while. Okay, so they divide the water flow into the fine number of the streams. There will be a huge number of the nozzles, and depending upon what is the number of the nozzles are to be provided, the motion will be always in the trajectory type of the motion. Okay, so you might have come across in a certain equation for the motions like S is equal to ut plus half AAT square, like that. Similarly, here also the same trajectory part is being made, where the number of the nozzles which are being provided will be having small diameter of the port, and the diameter of the port which having the small portion of an area. What happens there, the huge amount of the water which is being passed into the nozzles or the streams, they will be converted in terms of a small number of the water droplets. and the diameter will also be less. Okay, so the contact area will be more, the droplets area will be less, and the contact area will also be more. And therefore, the next aspect that we come across, it is related to bring the intimate contact with the trajectory, and how much amount of the head of the water is being required, or the pressure that if you're going to ask it. Therefore, it is ranging from 0.75 to 1.75 kg per centimeter square. This is the one of the most important thing. Next, by using the spray aerators, what is the advantages that you're going to get it? The answer for that is the reduction of the carbon dioxide compared to the cascade. Here in the spray type of an aerator, you can reduce it up to like from 70 to 90%. Okay, this is one of the important aspects we come across by using the spray aerators. So, however, the technical skill labor is required for the in order to maintain the operation facilities of the spray aerators. ಅದು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗಿರೋಂಥದ್ದು. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ಪ್ರೇ ಏರೇಟರ್ಸ್ ನ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ಡ್ ಪ್ರೆಷರ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇನೆ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಈ ಎಕ್ಸೆಸಿವ್ ಪ್ರೆಷರ್ ವಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್ಸ್ ದೇ ಮೇ ಬಿ ದ ಚಾನ್ಸಸ್ ಆಫ್ the malfunctioning, and there may be the due to the presence of some of the due to the presence of some of the precipitation causing reagents or the chemicals, obviously what happens, the nozzle will get tend to be clogged. ಅಥವಾ algal growth ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತಂದಾಗ ಅವಾಗ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, it will not be going to work in a proper manner, because whatever the diameter of the port which has been provided will be less. So these are the certain operation and maintenance techniques to be implemented. Okay, and next type of narrators, if you're going to take, I think one picture is there pertaining to the spray type of narrators. Okay, this is the spray type of narrators normally provided. Next, fourth one, illi bandaga, gravel bed type of narrators. What is meant by gravel bed type of narrators? As earlier, I have stated that the water is made to penetrate through the filter media. Okay, wherein some spreader tubes are also provided through the aid of the cast iron pipe. You will note the water inlet it is being provided here. Okay, and the next important aspect it is through the ports and all the water is tend to moving, and at the bottom here the gravel bed is provided. Especially the height of the gravel bed may tend to be 1 to 1.5 meters in height. Okay. And the next important aspect it is when a gravel bed is being utilized. Gravel means you might be able to know, or either in the case of any charcoal, if you are being going to use it, that we're going to call it as a dual bed media for the aeration. What happens? The water tends to penetrate between the pores or maybe the voids present between the gravels. So therefore, what happens? The air which is being present or the voids which are being containing the air, therefore those particles or maybe the gas stream will tend to dissolve in the water, and therefore what happens, the aeration process takes place. And here there is another thing which is being given, if air is not supplied in a proper conditions, therefore at the bottom the air is also being provided, that we call it as a motor driven type of the fan blower. Okay, this kind of the air is being passed in the upward direction, where water is being passed in the downward direction, that is from vertical to from top to bottom. This air it is from bottom to top. So okay, due to the counter attack between the water molecules as well as the air molecules, what happens, there is a dissolution process that has been happening in the case of the bed. And in order to say that since the water has the higher gravitation, but when it is being compared to that of the air, so therefore what happens, normally tends to reduce in fine droplets, or maybe that will be tend to pass through the container or a tray which is being kept at the bottom. Okay, this is what we're going to call it as a channel, separate channel. We call it as a aerated water channel. ನೀವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಎಡಗಡೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. Okay, this is the aerated water channel. Okay, where the water it is being temporarily retained, and the time which is being given especially for this will be in the interval of 10 to 15 minutes. ಇದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಇದನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟೆ. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? Okay, so there is another portion wherever any of the turbid content which is also provided, or if it is having high or huge amount of the suspended particulate matter, ಅವಾಗ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಸೆಟಲ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಸೆಟಲ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿರೋಂಥ ಪಾರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ನ ಮತ್ತೆ ಪುನಃ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ದೇ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಎ ಸಪರೇಟ್ drainage portion wherein that amount of the water which is being retained containing the suspended matter will be driven out. It is being driven away from the treatment plant. Okay, this is what we call it as a gravel bed type of an aerators. The next, another important aspect that we come across, it is related to the diffuse type of an aerators. Okay, what is meant by a diffuse type of an aerators? Obviously, one minute for a while. Okay, this is the diffuse type of an aerators. Diffuse type of an aerators, it consists of an pipe network. ಈಗ ನೀವು ಮನೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅಕ್ವೇರಿಯಂಗಳು ನೋಡಿರ್ತೀರಾ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ ಪೋರ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ತರ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಮೇ ಬಿ ದ ಪೋರ್ಟ್ಸ್, ಓಕೆ, ಹೋಲ್ಸ್ ತರ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ. When you're going to switch it on and you're going to place the diffuser inside the aquarium, what happens? The air bubble tends to form and therefore it will travel to a greater extent. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಿಚ್ ಕೂಡ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ, ಎಷ್ಟು ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ, ತುಂಬಾ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಬೇಕಾ, ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಬೇಕಾ ಎತ್ತ ಅಂತಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅಂತ. ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ the more amount of the air will be surpassed through that device. Okay, or in other cases what happens, the perforations will be going to be made huge in nature. Okay, sometimes in the case of the large treatment units, okay, ಮನೆಗೆ ಅಕ್ವೇರಿಯಂ it is a small scale. ನೀವು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಟ್ರೀಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಗೆಲ್ಲ ಕೊಡಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತಂದಾಗ obviously ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, the diffuser has to be placed at the bottom, not at the top. Okay, bottom ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ and air bubbles tends to travel at the top, which is being causing the aeration. So when the air is being passed through the diffuser, so therefore what happens, it tends to aerate it, and literally the detention time which is being given, it is 15 minutes. Yes, to depth ಕೊಡ್ಬೋದು, we call it as the aeration tank itself only having the diffusion process. The term diffusion means it relates to the movement of the molecules from a region of an higher or maybe the lower concentration in response to the concentration gradient ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. Okay, the factors which has been affecting the diffusion, it is mainly related to the concentration gradients. That is one of the most important aspects that you people need to have a grip over those concepts. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? The next type of an aerators, we call it as a surface type of an aerators. ಈ ಸರ್ಫೇಸ್ ಟೈಪ್ ಆಫ್ ಅನ್ ಎರೇಟರ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿರ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ನಾರ್ಮಲಿ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಪ್ರೊವೈಡೆಡ್ ಫಾರ್ ದ ವಾಟರ್ ಟ್ರೀಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್, ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಲಿಟ್ರಲಿ ಪ್ರೊವೈಡೆಡ್ ಫಾರ್ ದ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಟ್ರೀಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್, wherein the huge amount of the wastewater surpasses through any of the treatment unit, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, the dissolved oxygen content will be less. Therefore, in order to increase the dissolved oxygen content, we come across by using this aerators, we call it as a surface aerators. Even ಕೆಲವು ಸತಿ ನೋಡಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಈ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣಿ ಕೊಳಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಏನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಪಾಜಿ ಕಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಥವಾ ಏನಾರು ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ, ಅಥವಾ ಕೆಲವು ಲೇಕ್ಸ್ ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನ ಈ ಸರ್ಫೇಸ್ ಎರೇಟರ್ಸ್ ನ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. Okay, they have to be provided like in a floating type, and due to the floating type of an aerators ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್ಫೇಸ್ ಎರೇಟರ್ಸ್ ಅಂತಾನು ನಾವು will be going to have an interchange itself only, the terminologies, but the function of working it is the same. There the water is being made by the use of the turbines or the rotating fans. ಈ rotating fans ನ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ದೇ ಗೋ ಫಾರ್ ದ ಡ್ರಿವಿಂಗ್ ಇಟ್ ಔಟ್. ಇದು ಹೆಂಗೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಿಕ್ಸಿ ಹೆಂಗೆ ರೊಟೇಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೋ, ಪ್ಲೇಟ್ಸ್ ಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಹೆಂಗಿರುತ್ತೋ ಅದೇ ತರ ರೀತಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಇದಕ್ಕೂ ಕೂಡ ದೇ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ದ ಪ್ಯಾಡಲ್ಸ್. ಓಕೆ, the paddles will tend to rotate from the surface itself only, thereby inducing the aeration process. This is what we call it as a surface aeration. Horizontal surface aeration process ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ತರ ರೀತಿನ ಸುತ್ತುತ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. Vertical means obviously it is like this direction, okay, in the axial direction. This is one of the important thing that you need to remember. Next type of an aeration that we come across, it is a draft tube type of an aerators. As I have told that there is a less than 1 minute it is showing, but anyhow, ಮತ್ತೆ ಪುನಃ ಅದೇ ಲಿಂಕ್ಗೆ ಕೂಡ ನೀವು ಜಾಯಿನ್ ಆಗಿ. ಓಕೆ, ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇ ದೇರ್. ಇಟ್ಸ್